I'm sitting here with a stack of the 10 best books that I read this year. And this is my third year running making this video, and I'm pretty excited about it. So let's not waste any time. And normally I have rules when I make this kind of a video. Actually, there's only one, and that rule is no rereads are allowed on the list of the top 10 books that I read this year. That's not going to be a problem this year because I actually have 0 rereads, period, on this entire year, which is, I think, the first for you, at least for my YouTube career, if this career. Anyway, let's not waste any time. Let's just get right on into this because, you know, who doesn't like books? I'm going to not drop them this time, guys. Now, not wasting any time here, we're going to start off with number 10, Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. Ender's Game is basically, you know, top tier child abuse fiction, which, now that I've said that out loud, I think I'm going to have to censor that out because I don't think you're allowed to say that on YouTube. But seriously, the mistreatment of the children in this book is shocking at points. Like, it is just wow. Anyway, but no, I don't think Ender's Game really needs any introduction. It was just a wonderful book. And like I said, it was surprising how dark it felt at times with the way the kids were taken and the way that they were trained and made to do the things that they were made to do. Ender in particular. And it was just a really engaging read. It was a quick read. The pacing was very well done, and honestly, it's a pretty short little book. That led me directly into The Speaker for the Dead, and I think I actually haven't gone any further than that. I've just read those 2 books so far, and I actually think that Speaker for the Dead is just as good as Ender's Game, and you could really interchange this one or that one for this spot on the list. If for some reason you have a preference for Speaker for the Dead, I would say it was just every bit as good as Ender's Game was. I just went ahead and put it on here as the pick for the list simply because it's the first and it is probably by far the most popular opinion of, you know, the community at large. Anyway, number 10, Ender's Game. Moving on to number 9, it's another author that I decided to read for the first time this year. It's another author that I read 2 of his books for the first time this year, but only one of them made it to the list, and it is Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. The other book that I read from him being 2001: A Space Odyssey, not as good as this one. It reads like the movie, if that helps you out. It's excellent. But this one is just the better read. I was shocked at Childhood's End. Now, I don't want you to think that this is somehow the best science fiction book that's ever been written, because it is kind of cliche at points, especially in the first and second act of the book. There are things that are going to happen and things that are going to be brought up you almost want to roll your eyes at. They're so ridiculous or so almost heavy-handed in the way that they're done. So if somebody got done with this book and they were like, that was some garbage, I would actually be like, I bet you I know what they're kind of thinking and where their head was at when they said they didn't like the book. Now, me, as much as I wanted to kind of roll my eyes, like I said, as I was reading this book, when you get to the end, I was like, oh, he really went there when it comes to the end of this. It went places I really didn't expect it to go. I didn't really know where it was going to go as I was reading it, but I sure didn't think it was going to go there. And it's a very interesting read for as far as a First Contact book is concerned, all the way from the way First Contact is handled and how the aliens act towards us to where we end up by the end of this. Every bit of it was very much surprising, and he was thinking kind of outside the box, and he was thinking outside the box, and he was thinking in directions and places that people don't even really think to go now, let alone however far back ago this was written. which I guess is the most surprising thing for me, was just how far outside of the box he was thinking when he wrote this book. As cliche and eye-roll worthy some of the parts and some of the details that he decided to add in were. Oh wow, there's another book of a new author that I've never read anything from him before, and I read 2 of his books this year. Wow, there's a trend going on here. Anyway, House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds. This was fabulous. This book was absolutely amazing. The other book that I read from him this year was Revelation Space. That's a good book too. Nowhere near as good as The House of Suns is. This shit's great. House of Suns is a book about a woman who clones herself. I forget how many of them. There's like 60,000 or something of them. Clones herself into both men and women. They are exactly identical in genetics and in their memories when they're cloned. Then they're all sent off in different directions into space, and they collect information and such. And then they come back every, I don't know, like so many years, and they get together, they share all their memories and all of their knowledge that they've learned, they pool it all, and then they go back out and they collect more. And they've been doing this for millions of years until one time they all go to get back together, and somebody is now hunting and killing the clones. And now we have a big mystery on our hands, and we have to figure out what's happening and who's killing them. It is just a joyful ride from the first page to the last page. It was a page turner and a half. That was some good shit. Although the one thing that confused me the whole time I'm reading it is because Alastair Reynolds is always considered, it might even have it on here. No, he's always talked about as a hard sci-fi writer. I didn't find any of that to even remotely feel like hard science fiction, unless just by the fact of having time dilation when you travel makes it hard sci-fi. Then I don't know. This felt more like Star Wars at times, with like magic bubbles and everything else. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And I understand that when you're 6 million years in the future, science and technology is going to feel like magic. But at that point, when you just have magic everywhere, it doesn't feel like hard sci-fi anymore. It feels like Star Wars, because you could literally do anything, and it was just insane. But so that's my one thing is, whoever said that this was hard sci-fi, get the what? No, I disagree. This is science magic. And somebody's going to be like, technically there are theories that he was looking at or something. Yeah, but he took it to the point where it was magic, okay? Anyway, great book. Go read it. Number 7, The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. This is one of those books that you hear about and you hear about and you hear about, and you just kind of put it off and you put it off and you put it off because you'll get to it eventually. Eventually came. I got to it. It's great. It is absolutely wonderful. Devil in the White City is a non-fiction book about the Chicago State Fair and the guy who built and designed the Chicago State Fair, and H.H. Holmes, the serial killer who was prowling the streets of Chicago at the time of the Chicago State Fair. It's also written in the style of a fiction novel. So it's written with the flow and the cadence of fiction, and it feels like a fiction book as you read it, but it is non-fiction. And he has everything in quotes in here, has a reference in the back to exactly where he found it, and you could look the references up yourself and double check and verify all of his sources. It's wonderful. And I picked it up. I was super excited to pick it up because H.H. Holmes. I'm truly fascinated with him, kind of fascinated by serial killers in general, but him in particular, just because of what he was and what he did. And to get a nonfiction version of it, I was super excited. And I wasn't disappointed, but what I was truly surprised about was it's kind of like, this book's kind of like, come for the serial killer, stay for the fair, because because I was almost more invested in the parts of the fair than I was in the serial killer part of it, like, which was utterly fascinating to me because I wasn't there for the state fair, but that guy, whichever one he was, doesn't matter. I don't care. The other main character, the guy with the fair, you would get just as invested in him making the fair and how the fair was going. And the Ferris wheel, was the Ferris wheel going to be done in time? Oh my God. It was amazing. It was just the greatest experience. I loved it. I can't recommend that one enough. And it only gets better from here. Number 6. It. I finally read It. It's shameful, I know, that I am like Stephen King is maybe my favorite author of all time, and I've never read It. I finally knocked it out. It's just as good as, you would expect it to be if you're a Stephen King fan. It is normally people's number one list on their favorite Stephen King books of all time. It definitely is not mine. It didn't even make my top 10 list of horror books ever, but I told people in that video that I would not hold it against them if for some reason they wanted to exchange it for like The Shining, because it is that good of a book, and I can see why it is so highly respected and so highly regarded by many, many people that it, number 6 on the best books I read the entire year. And I read 50 books this year. Well, I have read 50 books. No, I have read 49 books so far. My goal is 50, and there's 2 weeks left in the year. I think I'll be okay. Which is funny because my goal last year was 50 books, and I think I said on the video that I read 48 or 49, and I was re-looking at it, and I made some mistakes, and I actually only read 46. So I said in last year's video, I said I failed. I failed a lot harder than I thought I did. I had myself like gaslit into thinking that I read more. I don't even know. But yeah, anyway, It is fabulous. If you don't know what it is, I don't even know what to say to you. Number 5, The King in Yellow. This one actually was on my top 10 horror books of all time. And it's just not even a horror book. It is really just fantastic fiction. It's a book of short stories that was written by Robert W. Chambers back in the 19th century. And this is some of the literature that inspired H.P. Lovecraft to start writing his stories. And he has even written some stories in the world of The King in Yellow, because it is just that fascinating. It's not even all scary stories. There's even some just like almost straight up romance stories in this book, but it is almost just really strange fiction from the 1900s where this guy was really thinking outside the box as far as I can tell. I don't read a lot of books from the 1900s, but it's just wonderful and delightful. The prose is really nice. It can be a little dense and a little tough to read in the beginning because you kind of got to work your way into the way that they spoke and wrote 150 years ago, but it's just a wonderful read. I recommend it to absolutely anybody. Just read the first one, which is The Repairer of Reputations. Once again, it's a short story. And if that doesn't get you, you don't have to keep going. But I'm betting it will. I'd put money on it. Number 4, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Last year, I had Clara, and I love how I point at the bookshelves like you can fucking see anything. Last year, I had Clara and the Sun on my top 10 books that I read last year. It was fabulous, and I loved it. This year, I grabbed Never Let Me Go, and I think this might be the one that got him the Nobel Prize. I don't know, but it's truly wonderful. I went ahead and picked it up because it is so highly regarded, and it's the other one that he has written that instead of being like an old-timey period piece, this is science fiction. One of my favorite, if not my favorite genre of all time. And it's barely science fiction. It's really a story about some kids that grow up in a school and what happens at this school and how they bond and form bonds and relationships, and then kind of follows them after they graduate all the way through their lives for the most part. But the trick is, this isn't a normal school. This isn't even a school for normal people. There's something strange about this school. There's something strange about the people that go to this school, and what that means for them and how that will reverberate through the rest of their lives is really what sets this book apart. And it's not even the implications of what is being done in this book are pretty horrifying, and it will go all the way through. But really, once again, like in Clara and the Sun, it was about a little robot girl, but it wasn't really about the science fiction of the robot girl. It was more about her as a person. It's really not about the science fiction of what's happening at this school and what the school's about. It's really about these people and their relationships and how their relationships will travel, change, and evolve throughout their lives. It's so personal. I've only read 2 books from the man, but they are so deeply touching and deeply personal on a level it's hard to explain unless you've read a Kazuo book. He just has a way of writing people and writing relationships that will have you just really hanging on to the very last page. It's fabulous. I don't know what else to say. Never let me go. Here we are, down to the top 3. The top 3 greatest books that I read all year. Number 3, Valis by Philip K. Dick. This is going to be a controversial pick to be this high on the list because not even Philip K. Dick fans can agree that this is even a good book. And I thought it was fucking fabulous. I absolutely loved it. I cannot say enough about this. It is a book about a man with split personalities who's writing a book about himself, but it's about his other personality because he's trying to gain perspective on himself and his problems, but then he gets lost and then he starts to... It's insane. I can't even attempt to describe it here. If you're more curious about the ins and outs of this book, I have a whole video about... It's kind of like a why you should read Valis video. But it's fabulous. It was so entertaining for me to just read this man with split personalities attempting to decipher God and reconcile all the religions of the world into one master thesis that he calls the exegesis. It is the strangest read I've read all year, maybe in a long time, and every last page of it was so fascinating. I loved it. I couldn't have enjoyed it more. All right, so we're on to number 2. And this is the first book that I would say out of all of my reads this year that I would consider an absolute perfect 10 out of 10 perfect Musashi. It is a book about Miyamoto Musashi. He is the greatest swordsman in all of Japan, fought 60-something swordsmen in one-on-one single combat, beat every single one of them, created his own fighting style, and even wrote a book, The Book of Five Rings, which is right back there, and it is a book on sword fighting, swordplay, and philosophy. This is the book of his life. It is a fictional book because there's not many details that are actually known about his life, but this guy Yoshikawa took what little that we did know about him and expanded it into this 1,000-page epic. And there have been countless movies made about this book. There has been Vagabond. The manga is based off of this book. It is just such a good read. It is so engaging. It's philosophical. It's deep. It's the places that it will go. You will learn lessons, life lessons from Musashi. You will learn life lessons from Kojiro. You will end up learning life lessons that you didn't know you were going to get from Matahachi, which is kind of like who's kind of like an epic fuck up. And you will somehow, by the end of this book, have learned very important life lessons from him. It is 100% perfect 10 out of 10. I can't recommend it enough. And it's just a period piece. And it's a simple tale of a samurai and his life. It's wonderful. Now, number 1, the greatest book that I read this entire year. This is kind of hilarious to me because I even mentioned this book at the end of last year. I was like, oh, I started it. I didn't finish it. I set it down. I kind of forgot about it till like a few weeks ago. I didn't forget about it. I just haven't had time to get to it. And it is The Claw of the Conciliator, which is kind of hilarious to me because last year my number 1 book for the entire year was Shadow of the Torturer. Spoiler alert for last year's video, but this year it is The Claw of the Conciliator because I never got around to reading it because they are so dense and there's so much happening in these books. I refuse to audiobook them and I only read them when I can sit down and I can really, really focus, because reading these is like walking through a dream, but seeing that dream through like cloudy glass. I don't know, a film of smoke. Everything is so distorted and then distorted again. And then you realize you're really just floating through a dream. It's insane. It is a story that's being told you from a man at the end of his life, telling you about his younger days, but he's also an unreliable narrator, but it's also a manuscript that was found by another man who has then translated it for you to read. It's weird. Sometimes the reading experience of a book, even if the content isn't great, can elevate that book to being a great book. Then there's books where the reading experience is just fine, but the content of that book is so good that elevates the book. And then there's books where the content is great and then the reading experience is next level, and it takes the whole thing to a point that I don't even know how to explain or describe. You could read it just as a surface level reading and get just a wonderful read out of it. It'll be completely dreamlike. It'll be fascinating. You might miss all the little bits and pieces that have been sprinkled in there for you. Not that I have caught them all. Oh my God, do not expect that. I've only read 2 of the 4 books and I don't know if I've got half of it, but I know that it's there. So as I'm going, I'm digging and I'm really paying super close attention and trying really hard to catch as many things as possible. So I'm catching quite a lot, which maybe I wouldn't have known to do if I hadn't actually, known about these books, at least the style that the substance of it's hidden from you as you go through it. But it's fucking amazing. I might just read 1 book a year for the next couple years so they can keep taking the top spot on every one of these lists for the next 2 years after now. I'm kidding. I really want to finish these. I actually am forcing myself to wait until January to start the next one because I don't want it to land on this year's, reading list. And then that way maybe The Sword of the Lictor can take top prize next year. And I really do want to read both of them next year because, that way I can be done with this. And then I can justify in my mind where it goes as far as greatest series of all time. Probably number 2. Let's be real. It'll be number 1 or number 2. There is no way, and I'm only halfway through it, but there's no way it doesn't take that spot. This is amazing. If for some reason you have not read the Book of the New Sun, oh my God, go read it. I highly recommend it. I do have a video review of The Shadow of the Torturer if that would help any at all. But it is another one that is just an absolute perfect 10. I couldn't give it a higher score. I can't imagine any word that would need to be changed in this book that could make it any better than it is. And that is a rare thing for me to say. Yeah. Anyway, everybody, that's going to be it. Please do me a favor, go down into the comments. I would love to know what exactly was the greatest book that you read this year. And as always, everybody, the link for my Patreon is in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.